Now that the Witch Queen has come and gone, the next stop on Destiny's DLC roadmap is Lightfall, probably coming either late this year or early next year. The year after that, we will of course be getting the final shape, Destiny's last entry in the Light and Dark saga. Now, I know everyone wants to talk about new subclasses, and I have a whole video on that if you want to go check it out, but today I want to talk a little bit about the core of Destiny's gameplay, the loot. Specifically, the possibility of us getting a new rarity above exotics sometime in the future.
Rob Zombie poster.
So a few disclaimers right up front just so no one's confused. If I sound a little bit weird, I'm still recovering from COVID, so that's why. And this video isn't going to be super editing heavy or anything like that. It's more just a discussion. If you want a super edited video, go check out 6 Idiots vs. Vault of Glass. Now, a new rarity, let's talk a little bit about this, why it could happen, what it could be, you know, all that kind of stuff. Destiny currently has 5 rarities: common, uncommon, rare, legendary, and exotic. Exotic, of course, being the highest rarity you can currently attain in-game. Now, of course, if you've played the game pretty much at all, you know that you will only really ever see rares, legendaries, and exotics drop because commons and uncommons are essentially nowhere nowadays. Something that's important to keep in note about exotics too is that even though they are the top rarity, they're not all very good. They're exotic, they're special, they're unique. I mean, look, when was the last time you saw someone using cryosthesia? You just don't really see it because it's not that good, but it's a unique weapon, so it's exotic. However, to be fair, most exotics are very good, at least above average. I'm going to be making a lot of comparisons to Borderlands in this video, but if you look at Borderlands, it's very similar to their system over there. Legendaries are sort of their versions of exotics. Most of them are quite good, but some of them are absolutely horrible. Another thing that's important to note about exotics is that some of them, most of them actually, can only be obtained through certain quests or missions. And obviously you can only have one exotic weapon equipped at a time and one exotic armor piece equipped at a time. But enough of that, let's actually get to the topic of the video, a new rarity and what that could look like. Now, I know this might sound crazy to some people, but I think it is actually possible. I think this is something we could see at some point in the next couple years in Destiny. So here are my ideas for a new rarity. I think if there was a new rarity, it would probably come in the color red, because that's a pretty rare color in Destiny in terms of iconography. There just isn't a whole lot of red stuff in our inventory. No red rarities, no red subclasses, you get the point. However, if you watched my last video on the darkness subclasses, I strongly believe the third darkness subclass will be a red subclass. One of the ideas for a potential theme of that subclass was nightmare or something of the sorts because of stuff from the moon. Watch that video for more context. But something I do bring up in that video is that whenever there is an element in Destiny, we usually have weapons that have that element attached to them. We just started getting stasis legendaries, and we have a couple of stasis exotics. When corruption rolls around, Thorn will probably be turned into a corruption weapon, same with Osteostriga. But the idea of like a nightmare element was just strange to me. Like you can't shoot nightmare at someone, that just doesn't really work. So theoretically, let's say the third darkness subclass comes around and its theme is so strange that it can't really be tangibly placed onto conventional weapons. Maybe instead of trying to put, in this example, nightmare as an energy type onto legendary and exotic weapons, since that would probably be very difficult, maybe just make an entirely new rarity purely for nightmare based weapons, because they probably wouldn't be like anything we've ever seen in the game. Now, there were other possibilities there than just nightmare for the third darkness subclass, so I'm not going to pretend like that's what's probably going to happen, but that was one idea. Let's move on to the next idea, and that is just genuinely a rarity above exotic. I'm gonna switch our attention to Borderlands again for a second because it's a very good example of what I'm about to talk about. In Borderlands, you of course have common, uncommon, rare, epic, and then legendary. Legendary being yellow or orange. However, if you are familiar with Borderlands, you may have been thinking, well, what about the pearlescent weapons? So if you don't know, at some point in Borderlands 1 and 2, they introduced the pearlescent weapon rarity. It's like a turquoisey color instead of the blue that was was given to rares. They were very, very rare, and honestly were more similar to exotics than even legendaries were in Borderlands. Some of them were pretty good, others completely sucked. But also, on the topic of Borderlands, while we're here, let me take a moment to mention the Seraph weapons, or the alien weapons in Borderlands. You could also fold the Iridium weapons into this category as well. These are two rarities, if you want to call them that are kind of separate from all the other rarities. They were essentially separated because of their manufacturer and because of their theme, and how you get them. Not necessarily because they're rarer than legendary or anything like that. Coming back over to Destiny, exotics are rare, I guess, but are they really? I mean, a lot of exotics in the game have a source that you go to get them. At least most of the notable ones do. And random exotics at this point just aren't really that hard to come by. I mean, if you buy the season pass, you're guaranteed like 4 at least. However, what if there was a new rarity that was actually rare, like actually really difficult to come by? If it wasn't tied to the Third Darkness subclass, I'm not quite sure what these would be. They could be weapons of the darkness just in general. They could be alien weapons, they could be ancient weapons, I'm not entirely sure. But imagine if the only way you could get these red engrams was just random drops from doing random ass stuff, like back in Destiny 1. I mean, imagine it's like shiny odds from Pokemon, like a 1 in 8,000 chance every time you kill an enemy that it drops one of these red engrams. Bungie could essentially just treat them like pearlescents from Borderlands. They don't have to be good, they could just be cool. And this obviously wouldn't have to be limited to weapons. It could be vehicle related, armor related, ability related. But I just keep thinking about how exotics really aren't that rare unless you want one of the raid exotics that are a random drop. There's a reason people get so much more excited over those, because they're rare. My favorite weapon in the game is Vex Mythoclast, and I just finally got it like 2 weeks ago. It was like the coolest thing that's happened to me in Destiny 2. You know, if people want incentive to do more endgame activities, they could make it so that this new rarity type, whatever it is, could only drop from things like raids, Grandmaster Nightfalls, Trials of Osiris flawless runs. You could still make it a really low chance. I just think there's a lot you can do with this idea. Here's another idea. Exotics kind of have a unique trait or traits to them that make them exotic, and sometimes those traits are so unique they can completely change the way you play. However, what if these red engrams or rarity weapons or armor pieces or whatever the hell they could be, what if they completely changed the way your Guardian functions? This takes me into my next point of, after the Light and Dark saga is over, where are we gonna go? One of the main things people really look forward to every expansion now is subclass changes, new subclasses, new elements, things like that. But after the Light and Dark saga, I have a feeling a lot of that is gonna really change for pretty obvious reasons. Here's a crazy thought, and hear me out. I'm not saying they should do this or they will do this, but just what if they ditch supers and ditch subclasses after the final shape? In theory, if they did something like that, you could then use a new rarity, especially something of the caliber that I'm talking about, as a sort of vessel to fill the void that supers and subclasses once filled. You know, what if after the final shape, Destiny becomes a lot more vehicle focused? In theory, these red engrams or the red rarity type could just be new vehicles. I'm talking sparrows, pikes, ships, things with actual guns on them, tanks. Imagine if Destiny ever gets to the point where you can pull out your ghost and summon more than just a sparrow. What if in some engagements vehicles were allowed and one of your friends could just roll up in a tank? Now obviously you probably wouldn't be able to just do this at will. It would probably be temporary, or again kind of filling the void of your super if they wanted to be less ability focused after the final shape. I don't know any of this. This is just wild speculation at this point, but I think some of this stuff would be pretty cool. And I think one question on all of our minds has been, how is Destiny going to change, and what is Destiny going to be like after the final shape? And if you're asking me, at the minimum, I would not be surprised if at some point in the next couple years on Destiny, we saw a new rarity be introduced. Anyway, I'm gonna wrap this up there. My throat is starting to hurt. If you like this video, you may like the one I did on Darkness subclasses or 6 Idiots versus Vault of Glass. I love that video. I'm very happy with how it turned out. If you got this far, I appreciate that. Hope you found this entertaining, and goodbye.